as my job in the ITU takes me to countries that are considered still, in the development process. I've seen a lot of coaches who, let's say, the country lacks on a proper trial on school programs, let's say, or there are not many competitions for not even youth, so for younger than youth. And they have, let's say, in the entire country, there are, 50 juniors. And the coaches come to you and they start talking about power meters, critical speeds. And I'm like, I think you are too far from where you should be right now. So you're losing the sight because the information is reaching them comes from countries like Spain, where we are competing, in a different place, or UK, Germany, etc., etc. So my message always to the young coaches is to not forget the basics, because the basics matter. So what would be your advice for these coaches?
I like the word fundamentals more than I like the word basics, because I think the word fundamental points to a positive, essential part of what you need to do, whereas basic might be an affront to some coaches where they say, oh, wait a minute, I'm a bit more advanced than basic.
Okay, yeah. I'll change it then. I'm not going to use it basics ever.
Okay.
I'll take fundamentals now.
I started with running, and I started with school kids running. So I coached girls and boys. And, the only thing that you needed was a fixed distance. All right. And once you had a fixed distance, then everything becomes fundamental towards running that distance faster. All right. So on the bike, I can understand the need for a power meter. In the US, we sit with the same thing. But, we've already come up with a way to assess an athlete that comes from a very difficult environment and only has a bicycle and a car park, Yeah. So, everybody has a hill or a car park or a circuit where they can ride with 4 athletes or they can ride with 1 athlete, and they can measure the time. Everybody has a stopwatch. The first time I ever ran under 2 minutes for 800 meters, I used an analog watch. I waited for it to get to the top, and then I started running, try to get there before it went around twice. So I think your fundamental is velocity. Whether it's a 3K or whether it's a 1,500 or whether it's 1,000, you start there. What can I do with my athlete? They now run 1,200 meters in X time. I'm now going to work with them for 3 weeks, and I'm going to come back and run the 1,200 again. So an assessment that meets the rules of assessments, it's objective, it's repeatable, it's valid. All right. Now you can do the same hill climb on the bike, and you do that same hill climb and you run that same kilometer. Now you have a difference between that hill climb and that kilometer versus just running that kilometer. Now you have an off the bike factor. You have something to work on that is objective and simple and functional and fundamental. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
I listened to a podcast the other day that said that, functional threshold power is a waste of time, because it's just a number that says you're good or you're not so good. It doesn't tell you how to make that number better.
Yeah, or it doesn't even tell you how you need to behave in a competition, because actually at this intensity is the least you're gonna spend at. So when we're seeing like data from the World Cups or even the World Triathlon Series, the functional threshold zone is, I think people stays there like 10% or 15% of the entire bike leg. So it's kind of, you need it, you need to have that, but everything needs to be put in the right context. So, but I do believe some of the coaches, they are afraid of perhaps pushing too much. And I always try to put everything into the right perspective. So I have a 4-year-old daughter at home. And I take her to the park. Well, now we can't, but when we get to the parks, and I see all the kids, they go all out, all the time. Yeah. They sprint to the slide, then they sprint to the swing, etc., etc. But when it comes to the sport triathlon, it seems intensity goes against the belief of most of the coaches. I don't know if they think the athletes will get injured, etc., etc. And I always said, if you have a junior athlete or a youth athlete who is doing 1K all out and then gets injured because some of these fundamentals that you mentioned are not well developed. So perhaps there is a lack of strength, there is a lack of flexibility, the technique is not okay, which actually gives you the real data to focus your training for the next 3 or 4 days. Sorry, 3 or 4 weeks. So it's there's no harm of giving them a lot of intensity, because then on the competition, it's an all out race. It's not a steady pace.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to duration. I think the most effective training, but also the most dangerous training, is duration of intensity. It's when athletes start to lose form during a VO2 max workout that they lose that. You know, and so working with the juniors, you know, I've taken adults who have only done endurance work, you know, and they range between 35 and 60, and I'll have them sprint at 200. None of them get hurt sprinting at 200, you know. So it's this question of looking at impairments and deciding what can be done, you know, after that. But you're absolutely right. There is no way that a 6 or a 7-year-old child will pace themselves in a game in the backyard. They will not pace. They'll go flat out, and then they'll rest flat out, and then they'll go flat out. And that is what we need. We need the VO2 kinetics of an endurance event that is made up of multiple high-speed intensities. That's what we need in triathlon.
Definitely. And I think it's coming there, because, and that leads me to the next question I wanted to ask you, because everything seems to go towards like more fast and furious events, like you know, Super League, the mixed team relay. It seems for Paris there will be also a sprint distance race as part of the Olympic calendar. What do you think will be the key components of running in triathlon for success, actually?
You still got to think of, even in a super sprint or a mixed relay, we're still talking about a 20-minute event. So it's still a pure lactate threshold event. All right. It's not a VO2 max event. Yeah. It will require that. So, and then the running should, as far as I believe, will always be last. You know, so, you know, you're always thinking that you're running in an endurance factor, but moving your talent identification numbers, we already find this down to 1,500 meters. It's a pity that there isn't a difference between, another event between 1,500 meters and 800 meters. I still think 1,000 meters is also too short for the older runner. I think 1,000 meters, I think your assessment distance should be based on time. So in other words, you know, let's say we're trying to find out what the maximum aerobic velocity of a female athlete is, female elite athlete, you know, maybe that's 1,800 meters or 1,700 meters. Whereas with a male, it might be 1,900 to 2,100 meters, you know. So I still think that, you know, that 1,500 meter number, rather than looking at 3,000 or looking at 5,000. If you can run a good 1,500, you're always going to be able to run a good 3K and a good 5K. But if you run a good 5K, you're not necessarily going to be able to run a good 1,500.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, that's my thought there. And then also looking at this from a perspective of, if an athlete is a slightly slower runner, but their fatigue index off the bike is much, much lower, you know, so you might get somebody that goes 3:56 for 1,500. But off the bike can run 1,500 in 4:02, you know, as opposed to somebody that goes 3:48 or 3:49 for 1,500, but runs 4:05 off the bike. You know, so you have to be, when you talent identifying, you have to be wider.
Yeah, definitely. And especially for this kind of events which was mentioned, the bike, I think, is even more demanding than the bike any athlete can face during a standard distance race, because it's, as you say, 20 minutes race for a super sprint might be, I don't know, less 11, 12 minutes on the bike, but this 11, 10 minutes on the bike is full of accelerations, peak power, etc., etc. So you don't run the same way when you go on the track and you are completely rested, when you need to go with this, with your legs completely pumped up, and with, you know, we say this expression in Spain, we say with a taste of blood in your mouth.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the questions that you asked me is how can we improve athletes to run off the bike? And I've got 3 answers for you. And the first one is bike, and the second one is bike, and the third one is bike.
Yeah, definitely. But I also believe this is an old misconception about, you know, the coaches, because they're still thinking triathlon are 3 different disciplines, and it's not. And the fact that we used to train them like individually was more like not managing, but logistic issues.
Yeah.
Because if we have we can draw our perfect venue, and we have a swimming pool with a nice bike track just next to it, and then a running track or a running path next, we'll be there training and doing the 3 disciplines one after the other. But as long as we can do that, I think we should. This is the specificity of the sport that a lot of people is still nowadays forgetting. You know, like not doing a lot of breaks, or not doing a lot of short triathlons. This to me is key.
Yeah, I think it's key, but it's also end stage. So, you know, I feel that how I feel about this has changed over time. I feel that if an athlete is running well off the bike, very close to their potential, but their run is still not fast enough, but it's not fast enough from an open perspective, that if I give that athlete more bricks, they're not going to run faster off the bike. They are neuromuscularly better. They need to go and train a bit like a runner to run better. If they then come back and then they slow down too much off the bike, now they need to go neuromuscularly get that right. Yeah. I love what Peter Robertson said, the guy that won the world championships 3 times. He said, I've never raced well in a triathlon when I've been at my peak running fitness. I've raced the best when I've been at my peak bike fitness. Yeah. And he didn't go on to say that, but I would have gone on to say, by being strong on the bike, by being functionally fit on the bike, I allow the best run that I have to be available.
Definitely.
And I think that if you start with the triathletes too young, specializing as triathletes, they will not be fast enough on the run. So you need to have a mindset of developing the run as well along the way. Because remember, you need to, if you come out of the water first, you're a damn fool, right? You should, if you can come out of the water first, you should be coming out of the water second, so that you don't work so hard, you know? If you by far the most powerful cyclist, riding off the front of the pack and going into transition with a 90-second lead is actually probably quite foolish. You know, you're better off coming in at the front of the lead pack, but, you know, being second or third, so that you haven't worked that hard, you know, to make the best run you have available. So, you know, I think we are growing, and coaches are starting to understand that process, and it is our job, and what we are tasked to do is to explain that, because the sport will get faster and faster and faster.
Definitely. And just to,
as the runners start running faster, so there will be runners that give up because the sport is too fast, and we will get somebody eventually in the sport in the 10 who's a 27:50 10K runner, who wasn't fast enough, so now has come to triathlon.
Yeah. We have also the option of welcoming them to duathlon. The swim is not even a problem because we can welcome them and just make them a world champion in another discipline that they will never dream of doing if they stick to run. So this is the thing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing to what you say.
Is still to have athletes like Henry Skuman and Beth Potter, in the same sport, elite runners that are, only just meeting the demands of competition or not, or, high-end swimmers who are winning Olympic medals. That's the beauty of triathlon. There's many ways to get on that podium.
Definitely. So, Bobby, it's been a pleasure having the chat with you. We've been an hour already, and just a message is popping up here. You have 1 minute remaining, so okay. I'll stay here for a couple of hours more. But I don't want to take a lot of time. I know you're still busy. Well, you're busy because you are actually still working, and most probably your journey will start after this call. So once again, thank you very much for taking the invite and joining me for this live chats. It's been a pleasure as always, and just looking forward to meeting you somewhere else in the world.
All right. Well, this message goes out to the young athletes in the world. Keep at it. Pay attention to the fundamentals. And thanks for having me, Vicente.